Let's get into it. Coach Colin News here. Jordan Peterson schools someone in a debate. That person is Destiny. If you don't know who Destiny is, he is the millennials Ben Shapiro. Talks very fast, very much about that facts don't care about your feelings type of stuff. You know, he used to be a conservative, switched to being very left-leaning. He's a very interesting guy, but his whole MO is just debating people. That's all he just goes from person to person, just debating. He's debated Ben Shapiro. He's debated Candace Owens recently. He's just gone, anyone you can think of. He's probably had a run-in with them and gotten into a heated debate. This time with Jordan Peterson over the topic of climate change. He gets stopped in his tracks, and Jordan Peterson beautifully lays out his position in climate change and also links that to the WEF and the policies that are so anti-human that the WEF keeps trying to push on people. And it's just, he just lays it out so perfect, and he asks the perfect question at the end of all of it. So let's just get right into this. I've never seen somebody. Destiny came to debate, but it turned into a masterclass. You know, it was one of those things, you know, like you step into the ring with Mike Tyson or Floyd Mayweather and you're like, oh, I'm gonna, yeah, this is a regular match. And then they're so good that you're like, oh, I'm just gonna learn. I'm not gonna win. I'm gonna learn. And my next debate, I'm gonna be even better. That's exactly what Destiny came to in this. Silent, which is very rare for Destiny. Let's get into it.
Economically as a consequence of that climate change. And so that's like two towers of Babel stacked on top of one another. And so, because if people were just saying, oh, the climate's going to change, there'd be no moral impetus in that. It's the climate's going to change and that's going to be disastrous for the biosphere and for humanity. But that's an economic argument as well as a climate-based argument.
It's both, but the worst projections of what would happen if the climate took a disastrous turn are worse than the worst projections of what is our planet going to look like economically if we hardcore police,
right.
fossil
why
fuels.
would you? Okay, but
I
don't understand the distinction between the models.
Well, the argument would be that whatever pain and suffering poor people might endure right now because of a move towards green energy, that pain and suffering is going to be short-term and far less than the long-term pain and suffering.
Right, but that's dependent on the integrity of the economic models and
the climate models as well, right?
Right, exactly,
course,
but is in exactly the stacked manner that I described. And like, there's nobody in 1890 who could have predicted what was going to happen in 1990 economically. Not a bit. And if we think we can predict like 50 years out now with the current rate of technology and calculate the potential impact of climate change on economic flourishing for human beings, we're deluded. No one can do that. And then, it's worse. So imagine that as you do that and you project outward, your margin of error increases. That's absolutely, definitely the case. And at some point, certainly on the climate side, the margin of error gets rapidly to the point where it subsumes any estimate of the degree to which the climate is going to transform. And that happens even more rapidly on the economic side.
Potentially, but right now, this is a disagreement on the fact of the matter, though, not the philosophy of what we're talking about in terms of controlling externalities. If we think, I'm curious, let's say that we think we can accurately predict the climate and the economic impact, and we think that the climate impact would be far worse if we don't account for that, both in terms of human conditions.
I don't believe any of those presumptions. I think
but then if you don't, but I mean, like, obviously, if I agreed with that factual analysis, I would probably agree with you on the prescription here too, right? If I thought that like none of the climate models were accurate or couldn't accurately predict anything, then I'd also say why make?
Well, they're not sufficiently accurate. That's the first thing. And because they have a margin of error, and it's a large margin of error, they don't even model cloud coverage well. That's a big problem. They don't have the resolution. They don't have nearly the resolution to produce the accuracy that's claimed by the climate apocalypse mongers.
People keep saying that, but we just got another one of the hottest years on record. How many times are we going to have another hottest year on record? How many times are we going to have an increase of carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere before we're finally like, okay.
I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because it depends. The scientific answer to that question depends precisely on the time frame over which you evaluate the climate fluctuation. And that's actually an intractable scientific problem. So you might say, well, if you take the last 100 years, this variation looks pretty dismal. And I'd say, well, what if you took the last 150,000 years, or the last 10,000, or the last 10 million? You can't specify the damn time frame of analysis.
The time frame is incredibly important. That would be like saying, look at your, let's say somebody developed cancer and they didn't realize it, and the person has lost, 40 or 50 pounds in the past 6 months. And I'm just like, you look very sickly. And you're like, okay, well, look at my weight fluctuation over the past 10 years. You say, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters
I'm
is the
not
fact
saying
that
the time frame isn't important.
Well, but I'm saying
that it is important.
Yeah,
I'm saying I don't know how to specify it.
Well, you would probably specify it with the beginning of the industrial age, right?
Why?
Because that's when carbon dioxide, which is a gas that's seen as trapping more heat on the planet.
Why is that relevant to the time over which you compute the variability?
Because it seems like as carbon dioxide has increased in the atmosphere, the surface temperatures have risen at a rate that is a departure from what we'd expect over 150,000 year cycles of temperature variations on the planet.
No, not with that time frame. That's just not the case.
It's absolutely the case.
No, what do you mean? You just flipped to 150,000 year time span.
What I'm saying is that if we expect to see a temperature do this in a 150,000 year time span, in a 100 year time span, seeing it do this, that's very worrying. Now,
you mean like Michael Mann's hockey stick, the one that's under attack right now in court by a major statistician who claimed that he falsified his data? I mean, that spike?
I'm talking about the record temperatures that have been declared for like the past 5 years that have also increased with the concentration of parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that every model is perfect.
They're not
right
perfect.
Now, sure, but right now we're like standing in traffic with our eyes closed saying the car hasn't hit me yet, so I don't think there's any coming. I think it's pretty undeniable at this point that there is an impact on climate across the planet. I think
that's highly deniable. We have no idea what the impact is from. We don't know where the carbon dioxide is from. We can't measure the warming of the oceans. We have terrible temperature records going back 100 years. Almost all the terrestrial temperature detection sites were first put outside urban areas, and then then you have to correct. Then you have to correct for the movement of the urban areas, and then you introduce an error parameter that's larger than the purported increase in temperature that you're planning to measure. This isn't data. This is guess. And there's something weird underneath it. There's something weird that isn't oriented well towards human beings underneath it. It has this guise of compassion. Oh, we're going to save the poor in the future. It's like that's what the bloody communists said. And they killed a lot of people doing it. And we're walking down that same road now, with this insistence that, we're so compassionate that we care about the poor 100 years from now. And if we have to wipe out several 100 million of them now, well, that's a small price to pay for the future utopia. And we've heard that sort of thing before. And the alternative to that is to stop having global level elites plot out a utopian future, or even an anti-dystopian future. And that's exactly what's happening now with organizations like the WEF. And if this wasn't immediately impacting the poor in a devastating manner, I wouldn't care about it that much, but it is. I watched over the course of the last 5 years, the estimates of the number of people who were in serious danger of food privation rise from about 100 million to about 350 million. That's a major price to pay for a little bit of, what would you say, for progress on the climate front that's so narrow it can't even be measured.
I don't think the increase in hungry people on the planet is because of climate policies.
Why not?
Because I don't think that countries in Africa are being pushed away from fossil fuels. I mean, most developing nations.
Of course they are. They can't even get loans from the World Bank to pursue fossil fuel development. And there's plenty of African leaders who are screeching at the top of their lungs about that, because the elites in the West have decided that, well, it was okay for us to use fossil fuel so that we wouldn't have to starve to death and our children had some opportunities. But maybe the starving masses that are too large a load for the world anyways shouldn't have that opportunity. And that's direct policy from the UN, fostered by organizations like the WEF. They're going to have to turn to renewables. Yeah, well, good luck with that, because renewables have no energy density. Besides that, they're not renewable and they're not environmentally friendly. And then one more thing. There's one more weird thing underneath all of this.
Okay.
Well, let's say if carbon dioxide was actually your bugbear and it was genuine. Well, then why wouldn't the Greens, for example, in Africa, the progressives, be agitating to expand the use of nuclear energy? Especially because Germany has to import it anyways, especially because France has demonstrated that it's possible. We could drive down the cost of energy with low-cost nuclear, and there'd be no carbon production. And then the poor people would have something to eat because they'd have enough energy. And that isn't what's happening. And that's one of the things that makes me extremely skeptical of the entire narrative. It's like two things. The left will sacrifice the poor to save the planet. And the left will deindustrialize even at the nuclear level, despite the fact that it devastates the poor. And that's even worse, because if you devastate the poor and you force them into a short-term orientation, in any given country where starvation beckons, for example, they will cut down all the trees and they will kill down all the animals and they will destroy the ecosphere. And so even by the standards of the people who are pushing the carbon dioxide externality control, all the consequences of that doctrine appear to me to be devastating, even by their own measurement principles. We're trying to fix the environment. Well, boys and girls, doesn't look like it's working. All you've managed to do is make energy 5 times as expensive and more polluting. You were wrong. That didn't work. And I can't understand. You can help me. That's why you're here today talking to me. I can't understand how the left can support this.
Just one quick thing. Let's say that everything you've said is true. What do you think is the plan then? What is the goal? What is the drive? Like, why push obviously horrible ideas for the planet and the poor?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Well, because you're positing it, right? So what do you think is the driver goal?
Well, I listen to what people say. Here's the most terrible thing they say. There are too many people on the planet. Okay, so who says that? I've heard people say that for 30 years. Perfectly ordinary, compassionate people. Well, there's too many people on the planet. And I think, well, for me, that's like hearing Satan himself take possession of their spine and move their mouth. It's like, okay, who are these excess people that you're so concerned about? And exactly who has to go? And when? And why? And how? And who's going to make that decision? And even if you're not consciously aiming at that, you are the one who uttered the words. You're the ones who muttered the phrase. What makes you think that the thing that possessed you to make you utter that words isn't aiming at exactly what you just declared? And so that's a terrible vision. But when you look at what happens in genocidal societies, and they emerge with fair regularity, and usually with a utopian vision at hand, the consequence is the mass destruction of millions of people. So why should I assume that something horrible isn't lurking like that right now, especially given that we have pushed a few 100 million people back into absolute poverty when we were doing a pretty damn good job of getting rid of that? And I just don't understand what's happening in Germany or in the UK. Like, it's insane. Like, look, man, if they would have got rid of the nuclear plants and made energy 5 times as expensive, and the consequence would have been they weren't burning lignite coal as a backup, and their unit production of energy, of pollution per unit of energy had plummeted, you could say, well, look, we hurt a lot of poor people, but at least the air is cleaner. It's like, no, air's worse and everyone's poorer. So explain to me how the hell the left can be anti-nuclear.
Okay.
I don't understand it at all.
Gotcha.
Holy jeez, man. Jordan Peterson, man, absolutely incredible as always. That was incredible. Because here's the thing. So many people have this reluctancy to touch on all the factors. And as you're talking about climate change, you want to be this respectable person. You want to be this person that is seen as sane. So you don't want to bring up the WEF, and you don't want to bring up Agenda 2030, and you don't want to bring up the fact that every single time that these people talk about climate change, you can look and see that the end result is more power for them and less power for the people. You don't want to bring that up. So, but the fact that he was able to bring it up and say, this is policies from the WEF. These are the things that they want. They do talk about too many people on the planet. They do talk about needing less people on the planet, but they never talk about what the plan is to actually have that come about. And it is like Satan himself speaking. And such a great thing that he said. He said, what possessed you to say it? How do you know what is possessing people to say it? Because there are regular people, exactly what he said. There are regular people who will say something like that, and they think they're saying it from an intelligent place. but you're not saying it from an intelligent place. You've been almost, I don't even want to say brainwashed. I want to say like co-opted into this way of thinking, this sacrificial way of thinking. And there's so many people like that who have no problem doing that. And it doesn't even stop at climate change. It extends into LGBTQ. Like it extends into that world where there's so many people who are willing to give themselves up to look like better people. They're willing to be silent to look like better people. They're willing to let their kids do whatever they want to their bodies just so they could look like better people. And they're acting like it's all in the name of good. But what possessed you to think that? That's such a good question. Because if you really, and this is the thing, Destiny has information. It's not like he's dumb. He's not a dumb guy. He's an intelligent guy. I like him, actually. But he has information about climate change. Jordan Peterson has information about communism, the rise and fall of it in multiple nations, what happened in World War II, dictators, Stalin, Carl Jung. He has all this other information that helps him see what's going on with climate change so much better, because it is like some kind of cult. You know, Elon Musk, when he was on Joe Rogan, he called it a death cult. The people in Silicon Valley and how they act and how they have no problem with people all over the streets and overdoses and this and that, because it's all this sacrificial way of thinking. You're okay with the homelessness. You're okay giving up your own body, your child's body. You're okay with someone coming and saying, hey, we have to save the planet. And then all of a sudden it's like, how do we do it? Well, there has to be less people, and we'll do it nice and slow, and we'll mess with the energy. We'll make energy a little more expensive. And then there's certain people who are on Social Security. This is exactly what he was talking about happening in the UK, where if all of a sudden you can't turn up your heat a few degrees, that can impact an older person's health dramatically. And they don't care about that. All right. And then on top of that, when he was talking about the people in Africa and how they're not allowed to use the fossil fuels, but that's gonna be harmful to their population. And it's like, well, it's fine because we're saving the planet. That's not saving the planet. That's sacrificing people. And I just love that he brought all that up, because we never talk about this anti-humanness that comes along with the climate change conversation. It's at the forefront of it. Every single time. You know, one time Justin Trudeau has I believe her title is a deputy prime minister of finance. I think that's her title. Her name's Chrystia Freeland. She's part of the World Economic Forum and the Bilderberg Group. And at one point, Canadians were dealing with higher gas prices. And she actually went on record saying, you know, it's good that the price of gas is higher. And keep in mind, there are some people, gas going up 10, 15 cents is like, I don't know. I guess I'm going to go to less places. I guess it's just to work and back. It impacts people a lot. She said it's a good thing because when they go to the pumps and they see a higher price, it's going to remind them how important climate change is. There is so much anti-human to this movement when you really look at it, when you really look at what they're really saying. You know, when you look at something like a 15-minute city, and I haven't touched on those in a while, I should do an episode on this channel about that. But when you look at something like a 15-minute city, it seems great. It's going to be bicycles and you're going to be able to do this and that. But when you look at it and all of a sudden you see it in action a little bit in the UK where they actually had protests about this thing, all of a sudden someone had a case where it's like, I can just turn here and go this way and I'm at work in 10 minutes. And they're like, no, that's the green area. You go this way. And it takes them 30 minutes. So it takes them 3 times as long to get to the same place. And for some reason, they're saying because this green patch exists, that's better for the environment. But you just drove 3 times the amount to get to where you needed to go. At every turn of this whole debate, there is this underlining, we want more control. We are going to tell you where to drive, when to drive. We're going to hike up prices. You're going to deal with it because you're the problem. You're the issue with the planet. And on top of that, there should be less of you. It's crazy when you really think about what they're trying to say. And they're saying it to us. At no point in time do people go, well, you know what? There's a lot of billionaires in the world and our footprint's so big. Nobody ever goes into the World Economic Forum and says there needs to be less billionaires. If there were less billionaires on the planet, then they wouldn't have the footprint that they have. And that would impact the planet positively. Millionaires too, because you guys have private jets as well. Nobody steps in and says, hey, private jet services should be completely taken away. Everybody should just have to fly with everybody like normal. Just fly commercial. No one puts up these ideas. Every single idea in this movement seems to be at the root of it. We're the problem and we're the thing that needs to go. And if we don't go, well, then we're going to fall in line. I'm heated. It's so weird. It's so weird. But I definitely, it's not weird. It's actually punishment. This whole thing is a punishment on us. That's what the whole thing is when you look at it. We're the problem and we need to be punished for the things that we've done. But if you really, I wish somebody could do the math behind this, because if you looked at the population and then you looked at how big of a carbon footprint all the billionaires in the world had, I bet it would rival every single regular person in the world, billionaires and millionaires. If you took all their carbon footprints, I bet it would rival the other billions of people. I bet it would. Oh man. But yeah, the argument of too many people is disgusting. It's funny how this whole thing went from debates to questions. Because he's like, why would they put these policies in place if they didn't work? And it's true. Why would California say, hey, every car needs to be electric, and then overnight be like, hey, don't drive your car, the grid's down, we can't handle all these electric cars? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Maybe if you didn't want people moving, that's the worst thing you can think of. Or maybe you're just really incompetent. I don't know. Maybe the mind virus that Elon Musk talks about, the woke mind virus, maybe it's just massive virtue signaling. Maybe it's virtue signaling to the detriment of your own species. I don't know. But it's a good question to ask, because you really do have to look around and say, why are they doing all of this? And then their excuse is a time where none of us will even be around. Oh man, well, 400 years from now, right? It's not about us. 400 years from now, it's gonna look bad. It's like, what do you care about 400? What do you? Oh, my kids. It's about the grandkids. You care about the grandkids. You notice years ago it was like, you better care about grandma. And then when it comes to climate change, it's like, you better care about grandkids. And if you don't, you're a bad person. It's ridiculous. Anyway, pain and suffering. And then yes, the left is willing to sacrifice people, and that's never stopped. And I think that's a part. I'm not even going to get into that. But there is some kind of thing where they're willing to sacrifice people. And all I'll say is I think it's something that's been going on for a long time. And I don't know why they do it, but it seems just as wild as when you hear the Mayans used to sacrifice people. Like way back in the days, like, oh, they used to sacrifice people at that temple. And you're like, why would they do that? And who are these people who were willingly being sacrificed? It was their own people. And they had whatever excuse they had built up. And today we still have these excuses built up. Anyway, I'm ranting. Let me know what you think about Jordan Peterson and everything he had to say just now to Brother Destiny. Let me know what you think about Destiny's takes, because, he's not a dumb guy. He's an intelligent guy. Check out his channel. His name's Destiny. Used to have blue hair, but he's grown up a little bit. Now he has normal hair. I like that. And let me know what you guys think in the comments. Other than that, I'm out.